Hello, my name is Drew Loveland. I'm the Wellness Director at the Randolph County YMCA. Today the presentation is entitled, What is Your Heart Telling You? This presentation will tell you about how fitness level and possibly different medical conditions can be projected by knowing what your heart rate is. With that being said, we'll get started. First, we're going to talk about taking your pulse. So many of you have taken your pulse before, I'm sure, through different activities that you've done in your lives, but we're going to go over this just to make sure everyone's on the same page. First way we're going to talk about are wearable trackers. These are different devices such as Fitbit, Apple Watch, I'm sure there's others as well, that can tell you what your heart rate is throughout the day. So these devices can tell you what your heart rate is during your exercise session, while you're asleep, while you're sitting at your desk. All you have to do is look at your watch. It will tell you what your heart rate is immediately. It's a really cool device, great technology that helps you track your heart rate, which is a really important number that we're going to talk about why it's so important throughout this presentation. So that's a great technology that you can use, but if you don't have that, you can take your heart rate the same way people have been doing it for years and years. So you take your pulse on your wrist and your neck, using your index and middle fingers for 1 minute. This will give your heart rate in beats per minute, which is the common way that people note what your heart rate should be. You can even take your heart rate for just 30 seconds, take that number times 2, 20 seconds, take that number times 3. That will help you get to that beats per minute number, but not have to take your heart rate for an entire minute. This is especially a good idea to do when you're exercising, especially if you're exercising vigorously, because your heart rate can drop really quickly, and if you try to take your heart rate for an entire minute, you may have a drop in your heart rate by the time you get to that end of that minute. So that will make your number that you get a little bit inaccurate. If you take your heart rate for less time, that will give you a more accurate idea of what your heart rate actually is during that exercise session. Now that we've talked about how to take your pulse, we're going to talk about some different measurements that you can do once you've found your heart rate. So the first one is your resting heart rate. This is measured when you're laying down. You have to be laying down for this one for sure. You can't be sitting up, standing up, moving around at all, because your heart rate's going to be elevated just being in that upright position. So make sure that you're laying down for a couple minutes. That gives you time for your heart to slow down. And once you have your resting heart rate number, whether you've taken it with a wearable tracker or you've taken it by taking your pulse on your wrist or your neck, you can do some analyzing of this number. So usually the lower the resting heart rate is, the better it is. It means that you're very fit because your heart is strong. It can pump out a lot of blood, and you're able to do the body's function during rest very easily, and your heart doesn't have to pump as much. If your heart is pumping many times and your heart rate is very high, that means that you're probably not as fit because your body's having to work really hard, your heart's pumping a lot, and your heart is not pushing out as much blood per beat of the heart. So those that are fit, many athletes have very low resting heart rates, and if you're not as fit, your heart rate at rest will probably be a little bit higher. On the other end of the spectrum is maximum heart rate. Maximum heart rate is the level at peak exertion. So this could be done while you're running, biking, playing basketball. Doesn't matter what it is. This is when your body is really working very, very hard. You can't sustain this level for very long because you're at the very maximum of your heart rate. Your heart rate can't go up any higher, and this is something that most people don't even get to this point, but sometimes we want to know what this maximum heart rate is so we can do other calculations to kind of have an idea of what our target heart rate zone is, which I'll talk about more later in the presentation. But how you can find maximum heart rate is by taking 220 minus your age. This will give you a rough idea of what your maximum heart rate is. It may be lower or a little bit higher, but this will give you a really good idea of what your maximum heart rate. There's even a formula that you can use that will get you even a little bit closer to your maximum heart rate, but each person's rate is going to vary slightly. But if you take 220 minus your age, you're going to get really close to what your maximum heart rate is. So I mentioned on the last slide, but target heart rate is the ideal range for heart rate during exercise. So in general, the target heart rate zone is 50 to 85% of your maximum heart rate. That's why you need to know what your maximum heart rate is, so you can know what your target heart rate is during exercise. Within the target heart rate range, there's two levels. There's moderate intensity and vigorous intensity. Moderate intensity is 50 to 70% of your max heart rate, and vigorous intensity is 70 to 85% of your maximum heart rate. So if you're just beginning exercise, you want to stay more within the moderate intensity. And if you've been exercising for a while, you want to be more in the vigorous intensity. You can even drop it down to moderate if you're kind of trying to take a break. Even though you've been exercising quite a bit, you maybe want to still exercise but take down the intensity a little bit. But in general, you want to be between the 50 and 85% mark while you're exercising. If you're below 50% of your maximum heart rate while you're exercising, that's a good indicator that you need to increase your intensity. If you're above 85% of your maximum heart rate while exercising, that's a good indicator that you need to decrease your intensity. So, on this slide we're going to talk about different ways that you can improve your heart rate. So the first item on there is something that I've been talking about quite a bit during this presentation, is increasing your physical activity. The more physical activity that you do, it's going to strengthen your heart, especially if you're doing aerobic activities such as running, riding your bike, doing an elliptical, doing the rowing machine, playing sports. Those will all get your heart beating really quickly during those activities, which will strengthen your heart and it will allow your heart rate to be slower at rest. We talked about earlier how a lower resting heart rate can really be a good indicator of fitness level. So increasing your physical activity will help lower that resting heart rate. Eating a healthy diet will really help. The fuel that you put in your body has a big impact on how your body performs. So for example, increasing potassium intake. Bananas are a good example of a food that has a lot of potassium. Potassium is a nutrient that helps regulate your heart. So if you're eating well, fruits like bananas have a lot of nutrients and will help you have a regular heart rate. If you're not getting the correct nutrients in your body, then you won't be able to have as healthy of a heart. Your heart rate will probably be faster than it would be if you're getting the proper nutrients, and it just won't be as strong because your body needs those nutrients in order to perform at its peak. You can also have a fitness tracker. This is a good way to kind of know where your heart rate is at all times. If something looks not quite right, you'll be able to tell a lot quicker if you have a fitness tracker. You also can reduce your stress level. So I know all of us have stress in our lives that can increase our heart rate, but if we're able to reduce our stress, a couple of examples of stress reducers are getting a good night's sleep, or doing yoga or meditation. So doing these activities that can help reduce your stress level will really help lower that heart rate, so your heart doesn't have to work as hard. Even if it's not specific activities, maybe if you're able to reduce your workload, or just make sure you're taking breaks so that you don't get yourself stressed out as much. So there's different ways that you can help reduce the stress in your life, and that will have a positive impact on your heart rate level. Finally, we're going to implement what we've learned today. So there's a few different ways that I've listed on the last slide of areas that you can improve your heart rate. So if you pick maybe one or two of those different ways that you can improve your heart rate and focus in on those activities, you may have come up with some other areas that will also help you improve your heart rate. So come up with a couple of ideas of what you're going to do, and then set goals that are realistic and specific in order to accomplish having an improved heart rate. So it's very important to have a healthy heart. If your heart is not healthy, it's going to impact all the rest of your body, and heart rate is a great indicator of knowing how healthy your body is. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the presentation and that you all will make it a really big priority in order to improve your heart rate, which will make for a healthier body and a healthier life. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.